What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stochastic channel. And today we're talking college football DFS out of the Friday main slate. 4 games for you. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're brought to you by Prize Picks. They have a first match deposit bonus up to $100 for new users. And you are also going to get a free month of Odd Shopper when you take advantage of this deal. The link is in the video description below. Prize Picks has everything from college football, which we cover here, all the way to NBA, which is coming back soon, NFL, MLB, about to enter the playoffs, as well as a number of niche sports. We have projections for all of those, which you can use to take advantage of. The Odd Shopper tool is going to help you as well, identifying plus EV bets. So take advantage of all that and take a look at Prize Picks. All right, 4-game slate. We're going to kick things off with Louisville taking on NC State. 3-point spread in favor of Louisville. 55.5 total. Pretty generous here. Right away on the quarterback side of things, I think this is a pretty good spot to target a stud. The slate is not particularly tight in terms of pricing. So while you're going to see some players pop up value-wise with better price-adjusted projections, I think you do want to get to one of these signal callers. And personally, my preference is Jack Plummer as the favorite here in the offense that's been a little more efficient. And the efficiency is important here because Louisville has a 41% pass rate and they're 113th in pace. Conversely, NC State 49th in pass rate, 33rd in pace, but none of the efficiency. So you're going to have to wrestle with that. Can Jack Plummer get there on fewer opportunities versus Brennan Armstrong? Way more opportunities, way less efficiency. I guess just to parallel the two quarterbacks briefly here. Plummer's averaging 280 yards per game on 25 attempts. Brennan Armstrong is averaging 215 on 34 attempts. So right away, I mean, if Plummer gets coaxed into more opportunities here, it's hard for me to see Brennan Armstrong outscoring him. Plummer's also been decent on the ground. He has 13 designed attempts. That's important because he's not going to give you a 0 there. Armstrong is way more mobile. He has 24 designed attempts. He's also scrambling a ton, 25 scrambles to 4 sacks. So he's been great at avoiding negative plays. But I still think the ceiling is higher for Plummer. You're a lot more likely to get a 300-yard bonus out of him. And I do like the stacking options a little more for Plummer as well. So just 1 for 1. I slightly prefer Plummer versus Armstrong among the expensive signal callers. But I'm going to be playing multiple lineups. Believe there's a 150 contest. I'll definitely have some of both here. Really good game to stack overall. The run games for these two teams, I also prefer Louisville's. You just have a lot more opportunity condensed to one player in Jawar Jordan. 7K is too cheap for him on DraftKings still. Again, very little price restrictions. He has 18 carries in back-to-back games, and he's hyper involved in the pass game. His route rate is over 45%. He's essentially locked into the lion's share of work here. Isaac Garendo, more of a change of pace at this point, with Maurice Turner being an afterthought. Then on the NC State side, you did lose Jordan Houston. He decided to leave the program. I imagine he's going to transfer down to someplace lower level. And they did put Michael Allen at the head of a committee, which also involved Delbert Mims and Kendrick Raphael. Allen, I think, is live for tournaments. 10 carries. Didn't see a target in the pass game, but his route rate is still 30%. Not the best situation, but you could get there. Going to the receivers for both of these teams, you have one clear alpha for both teams. Jamari Thrash, 25% target share. He's averaging 100 yards per game, active on every single route. Only seen more than 6 targets once this year, but it's same thing as Plummer if we're coaxed into a pass-friendly script here. And this is a Jeff Brom offense. We've seen it be fast. We've seen it be pass-heavy. He's doing a great job morphing it to his offense as well as the weaknesses of opponents. All that to say, they probably get into some throwing scripts this year where Thrash is going to absolutely smash. He's too cheap. Casey Conception, Kevin Conception, however you want to say his name, he goes by both. He has more raw targets at 33, but a worse target share at 24.8%. I would personally rather play Thrash, but ultimately, you can't really poke holes in either one of these guys. They're both pretty solid. Once you get beyond that is where things get a little trickier to evaluate here. Louisville has changed their receiving core a little bit, and it's kind of hard to decipher here. Amari Huggins-Bruce route rate plummeted last week down to 23%. He only had 3 targets, and that coincided with a rise in routes for Chris Bell and Kevin Coleman, both of them above 50%. None of these guys are going to play a full route share for Louisville, so you're kind of throwing darts one way or the other. Jimmy Callaway also involved in this, as well as tight end Nate Gajewski. Pretty tough to play a Louisville pass catcher, at least, and feel good about it. These are tournament plays for you, those of you playing 150s. As for NC State pass catchers, my mouse died. This is pleasant. Let me plug this back in. Riveting theater here. All right, we're back. We're back. NC State pass catchers. I think the number 2 is pretty clearly Keon Lesane. 72% route rate on the season. He's the only guy that's really received a locked-in route share for this team. They're rotating about 8 guys among their receivers. So outside of Lesane at 78% of the routes last week, your next best bet would be Julian Gray. He did see his route rate jump from 33% to 70%. So I'm ranking then Conception, Lesane, Julian Gray, and fourth would be Porter Rooks, 58% of the routes. These are guys I don't want a ton of. Again, I'll be focusing my attention mostly to the top guys, Conception, Thrash, mixing in like Chris Bell's and Julian Gray's, Porter Rooks, Lesane's for big tournaments. A guy like Rosner probably is going to pop for his price, but only 30% of the routes last week. I wouldn't be too confused by Rosner here. 4 targets, he would be just a pure dart throw, and I'd rather play Chris Bell. Second game, Louisiana Tech takes on UTEP, 1-point spread in favor of UTEP. This has been moving rapidly, so I wouldn't be surprised if Louisiana Tech's favored by the time you watch this. 52 total, and no matter what happens, it shouldn't be a crazy move one way or the other. Louisiana Tech has a 55.5% pass rate. They're 63rd in pace. They run sort of a pseudo air raid attack. Hank Bachmeier is questionable. But for those of you that need salary, I love targeting this situation. And I honestly don't care that much who starts. Bachmeier, he's been fine. He takes some sacks. You're going to have to contend with that. But the offense will get him to 300 yards on occasion. And Jack Turner actually played pretty well behind him. Solid efficiency metrics for Turner. I think he's a little more mobile than Bachmeier. He has the same amount of designed attempts, and he already has 31 rushing yards. So I think he's less likely to get you a sack. The way I'm approaching this is I'm going to play some of the Louisiana signal caller, and I'm going to slot Bachmeier in. If he ends up being out, it's a very easy pivot to Jack Turner, and it's only $400 separating them. On FanDuel, they're the exact same price. So this is a very easy swap to make if Turner ends up playing. And again, I don't think he's a huge downgrade. The backfield here. Holy smokes. I don't know who's going to play. Keith Willis injured. Charvis Thornton, Tyree Shelton, I think, are questionable. That's left us with Keldrick Moody and Jacob Fields. I don't know how many guys play for this team. Who's active? It's probably a timeshare either way. This is a supreme late news slate, and it already starts with this first backfield here, Louisiana Tech. I legitimately don't know what to tell you guys. I have no read on who's going to be active and who's not. You might get something like a cheap Keldrick Moody or something here, but you're going to have to watch. This doesn't even factor in Marquise Crosby. Their lead running back hasn't even played yet this year. If he comes back, he should immediately lead the backfield. So late news situation, watch. Otherwise, I'll probably be targeting other situations over this one. Receiving core, pretty easy. Top 2 guys, Smoke Harris, Cyrus Allen. No real movement there. Expect these guys to be the locked-in top 2 all season long. Where you can get a little different, I think, is your wide receiver 3, 4. Kyle Maxwell and Kobe Doru have both been out recently. Don't expect that to change. But you're starting to see True Edwards play a lot. Last 2 games, 93% of the routes. Then he went down to 46. That coincided with, DeColdis Crawford has finally gotten involved here. His route rate has continued to rise over 4 games. He's now up to 54% of the routes. Perhaps that rises even more moving forward. Tight end Ryan Rivera, 52% of the routes. He's basically splitting with Nate Jones 50-50, so I don't really want to get the tight ends much. But maybe guys like True Edwards and DeColdis Crawford hold some value here. Again, you're going to have to watch and see if Kobe Doru and Kyle Maxwell play. This is a very, very difficult late news situation for Louisiana Tech. Fortunately, Smoke Harris and Cyrus Allen are such good plays, so I'm not sure you need to throw your darts here. UTEP, Gavin Hardison is banged up. He's going to play, it looks like, through an injury. It's the same old with Gavin Hardison. He takes sacks. He likely ends up with negative rushing yards. The offense is 89th in pace, 50% pass rate. He's only averaging 189 yards per game. I would rather play the Louisiana Tech signal caller, whoever it is, over Hardison. The backfield is a disaster. Mike Franklin missed the last game. Deion Hankins played through an injury, and a lot of people didn't think he was going to play. He warmed up, and then he saw 3 carries before he had to get pulled. That put Torrance Burgess into a 20-carry role, and he saw 5 targets. That's 25 touches for Burgess. This is a pure late news situation again. If Hankins plays and Franklin plays, I don't have interest in Burgess. If those guys are out or limited, I would play a ton of him. So this is unfortunate. It's a late game. You're just going to have to probably be at your computer all night for this one. Otherwise, I would recommend not playing. In the receiving game, Tyron Smith is expected back. He's 5,700, the wide receiver 1 for this team. He has about a 20% target share, leads the team in targets if you exclude the most recent game. He'll be locked in. Kelly Akari's the 2, Jeremiah Ballard's the 3, both of them a little more expensive after Tyron Smith missed the most recent game. I'd be prioritizing getting up to him, but if you need the salary, Akari would be 2, and then Ballard would be 3 for me. Marcus Bellin, 9 targets last game. He was the replacement for Tyron Smith. I think he just goes right back to the bench. Utah, Oregon State, another late news situation here. 3.5-point spread in favor of Oregon State. Total is 44.5. We don't know about Cam Rising. We won't know until game time. If he plays, you can use him in tournaments. If he doesn't, Nate Johnson's going to start. He's 7,400 now, so he's no longer the supreme value he used to be, and he has the most difficult matchup he's faced all year against the stout Oregon State front 7. Backfield's another late news situation here. Jaquindon Jackson's questionable for the game. He only carried the ball 6 times before he had to exit. He's been dealing with an ankle all season long. Without him, Jalen Glover had 25 carries, also running a ton of routes, just not really targeted much, 1 target in the last game. But his route rate has spiked, so I have no issues using Glover. Another late news situation. You won't know until kickoff whether Jaquindon Jackson is active or not. I do have more interest in Glover compared to some other backs on this slate, so that's at least worth mentioning. Last thing for him, 40% route rate last week. No issues using him as a pass catcher. Receiving game, Brant Keithy's still injured. Unlikely to see him. Micah Pittman didn't play in the last game. I don't think he's going to play here. Munir McClain also didn't play. I don't think we see him. Mikey Matthews has been playing more and more for this team, which is a positive. He's their 4-star freshman. But his route rate still hasn't even touched 60% in an individual game. What you can say is they're prioritizing him. He led the team with 6 targets last game. Devon Vele, their receiver, who has a 90% route share over the last couple games, only saw 2 targets. Money Parks, his route share is locked into 80% last game. 2 targets for him as well. I would anticipate Matthews getting on the field more and more as the slate moves along, the season that is. So even with Vele and Parks larger in terms of route share, I'm still probably going to look to Matthews over them. Very difficult to play a Utah pass catcher unless we get Rising back. Then I would have a lot more interest in these guys. Tight end Thomas Yasmin's been terrible. He has 8 targets on the year. Oregon State, slight favorite here. Iwa Galilei, averaging 206 yards per game, 99 rushing yards. He's basically a fancy game manager. He has 17 design carries, which is solid, but it's not enough to really target on this slate. He's too expensive, and I think he's very clearly the quarterback 3 when you parallel him to Plummer and Brennan Armstrong in the expensive category. Running back is getting more difficult here. It's a 50-50 timeshare, Martinez and Fenwick. And last week, Martinez fumbled twice. He got benched late in the game. Fenwick has been awesome. If you look at these guys' opportunity, it's not all that different. 15.3 per game for Martinez, 10 for Fenwick. Yardage 108 per game for Martinez, 64.5 for Fenwick. Both these guys are really efficient. This is trending towards a 50-50 committee. I'll be mixing and matching both of them for tournaments. Utah's run defense does not scare me. Although they're only allowing 1.7 yards per carry, they come in outside the top 40 in Pro Football Focus efficiency metric for run defense. So I think the offensive line for Oregon State should be just fine. If these guys provide leverage, I'll gladly play them. Receiving game, basically we know who's going to be on the field. They just don't throw the ball a lot. It's Silas Bolden, it's Anthony Gold, and lately it's been tight end Jack Velling. All of them exactly 82% of the routes last week. Don't see that changing here. Wide receiver 3 is Josiah Irish, 52% of the routes. And then they'll mix and match tight ends like Riley Sharp, Jimmy Vaslin. They'll play a little bit here, which is why Irish's route share isn't quite as high as some others. Jeremy Noga should play a decent amount too as the wide receiver 3. All that to say, I think these are good contrarian plays. Velling in particular is very cheap. 16 targets. It actually is ahead of Gold. Gold did miss a game. But efficiency-wise, I still think Gold and Bolden are your top 2 pretty clearly here. Last game, Cincinnati BYU, I think a sneaky over spot. 2 teams in the top 60 of pace. I don't know if the defense scares you on either side, but Cincinnati is a 2-point favorite. This moved through 0 after BYU opened as a 2-point favorite, 48 total. Cincinnati's 53rd in pace. They're a run-based team, 44.5% pass rate. Emory Jones is highly involved in this. He has 32 designed attempts through 4 games, 186 yards. Doesn't take a ton of sacks. So I think you're looking at a pretty good floor ceiling combo for Emory. He's been good as a passer too, 242.5 through the air on 31 attempts. He's one of my favorite price-adjusted signal callers, and I think he should be in lineups for cash. The backfield, Ryan Montgomery left their last game with an injury. I believe it was a head, but it was hard to see. The broadcast didn't really say. Just know that he left early, so that's why you see him go from 20 carries to 3. Watch his status pregame. If he's out, that would consolidate opportunities for Corey Kiner and Miles Montgomery. I think you would see about a 70-30 split in favor of Kiner, but not sure. They like to run a committee. In the receiving game, this is very straightforward. They use the same 3 receivers almost every single play. It is highlighted by Xavier Henderson, the Florida transfer here. Almost every single route for Henderson. I think he makes sense as an expensive play. 90% of the routes last game. Braden Smith, the Louisville transfer, 83%. D. Wiggins, he comes in at 77%. Even tight end is somewhat involved. I think Chamon Mateer, he is somewhat viable. 64% of the routes last game. They did cut back on Peyton Singletary. These guys have sort of ebbed and flowed who leads the team in routes between the 2. So I think this is somewhat volatile. I would rather focus my attention on the big 3, Wiggins, Braden Smith, Xavier Henderson, and I prefer Smith and Henderson over anyone else for the most part in this offense. BYU, Keaton Slovis, they pass a ton, 57.5%, 58th in pace is solid. Slovis, I think, is a contrarian play that you can get to in tournaments because the floor is really low, takes a ton of sacks. He actually only has 5 this year. He's taken 5 sacks this year, and he still has negative 26 rushing yards. That's how little Keaton Slovis runs. 36 attempts per game. He's averaging 254.5 yards through the air. All that is solid for Slovis. But because of the sacks, I'm more likely to play a one-off pass catcher. Isaac Rex is the number 1 here, and it's mainly just because they rotate receivers so much. Rex, he has a 24.5% target share. He leads the team with 260 receiving yards. And he's only 4,700. He's priced as a tight end just because the pricing structure for DraftKings generally doesn't operate using tight ends that well. Aside from that, to get to the receivers, I'll rank them for you guys. I think Chase Roberts, Darius Lassiter, and Keanu Hill are your top 3. Last week, Chase Roberts, 70% of the routes. Lassiter, 81%. Keanu Hill, 76%. I don't know if Cody Epps returns. Their coaching staff spoke about him earlier this week and said this is going to be a situation where he's questionable every game this year. So it kind of reminds me of Romney last year. I don't think we see Epps play, and if we do, I think it's in a limited role. Wide receiver, they do rotate a fair amount here. So wide receiver 4 should be Keelan Marion. He was at a 46% route share last week. And then Parker Kingston's also hurt. Even when he's been healthy, he hasn't eclipsed 22% of the routes. So I'm not really that worried about Parker Kingston active or not here. Last thing, the backfield. Aiden Robbins is going to miss this game again. It's been the full LJ Martin show. He had 13 touches last game. Wasn't exactly the best game script, but this is a guy with 14.5 opportunities per game, good pass catching role. He was at 46% of the routes, active in all game scripts. Deion Smith will be a change of pace here, but Martin's still going to project very well. Strong price-adjusted play on the slate. Weird slate. To sum everything up, it's a huge late news slate. I would recommend being by your computer all throughout the night, especially the lock times, because you're going to get news. It's really the first slate this year where we have this. So big factor here. If you have questions, reach out to me on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. I'll try to tweet out all these injuries as well. But otherwise, we'll be back tomorrow for the Saturday main slate. Until then, good luck, everyone. We'll see you next time.